Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, your number one stop for all things polling and election analysis in the United States. Make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. Today, we're going to be covering my election forecast as it stands right now. And we got two little tidbits that are actually adding credibility to my forecast. So, when looking at the new electoral map as of today, and I do a lot of daily updates because I do think it's important now that we're getting closer to the end, because little changes can actually really affect what the end result's going to be. And what's pretty fascinating is that if we look at this right now, this is what my crosstab, accurate crosstabs breakdown gives me when I plug it in. When I plug it in, this is the result I get. I get Trump with 323 electoral college votes. He's winning Nebraska second by a tilt margin. Minnesota is around the same thing. He's winning Wisconsin by 6, Michigan by 4.6, which is actually right around where I have it in my forecast. Pennsylvania 5.3, North Carolina 8.5 point win. We currently have the state here, roughly give or take, as a 7 point win. Georgia, a 7.5 point win. We have it as like a 6 point victory. Arizona, about 6 points. That's where we have it. Nevada, around 5 points. That's actually exactly where we have Nevada. So the accurate demographic crosstab breakdown from some of the most accurate polls in 2020, when you plug in their demographic margins, this is what we get in the electoral college. We get Donald Trump with 323 to 215. And on top of that, we also have something else that is very interesting. If we look at the early returns in New Hampshire, I mean, it's not even, this is like horrible for them because Biden won the state by about 7. And right now, the early vote returns are 10 points more Republican than what they were before. And the thing about this is independents outnumber Republicans and Democrats by quite a bit in New Hampshire, actually. Republicans even outnumber Democrats in the identification process in New Hampshire. So if the early returns are this bad for Democrats, it's going to be a big problem for them in New Hampshire, and it is going to be competitive. I mean, I only have it as a 1 point win for Harris right now. It is way closer than what it was back in 2020, and this goes to show that I possibly may be correct in that regard. And looking at this other thing here, this is the People's Pundit. They just released, or they're about to release, a Michigan poll. By the way, we will actually be doing a show with them tomorrow. It'll be filmed and released tomorrow. So make sure to go ahead and check that out. You won't want to miss that. But what we see here is the People's Pundit was the most accurate forecaster or pollster even in Michigan as of 2016. They had a Trump plus 0.6 result, and Donald Trump won it by 0.2. So you literally couldn't have done any better than this guy. I mean, he basically nailed it. And now their Trump v. Harris plus third parties, including leaners, is a Trump plus 3.6 percentage point lead in the state of Michigan. And I have Trump plus 4.7 in the state in my modeled results. And so essentially, according to the most accurate pollster in Michigan, I'm narrowly overestimating Trump in the state, like barely overestimating him in the state. So if this ends up being the case, I will still be the most accurate forecaster of the election, including in Michigan, because if he's winning the state by 3.6, that's still a popular vote win for Donald Trump if he's really winning the state by that much. And so when looking at this, you're really seeing a really big shift amongst voters here. And right now, even Robert Barnes on the show today with What Are the Odds, he said that he's expecting a 4 to 5 point win, and his 2016 and 2020 predictions for the states were pretty close to what they were. And so he's predicting a 4 to 5 point win in Michigan, which is right around the window that I have it in. I have it on the higher end of that. Now, also, Bear has also said that this poll that he released could very well be underestimating Trump because of the fact that Donald Trump always catches up later during the cycle. And he feels like if he polled the state again back all the way at the end of October, he'd probably even get a bigger lead for Trump, which would look something similar to mine. So the fact that me and Rich, who's been one of the more accurate pollsters in the state, are lining up pretty well, that's a good sign for the forecast that I have. And now, looking at the electoral map, it's just a disaster for Democrats. And the problem is, we're gonna look at this really quick. So, what ended up happening in 2020 is you obviously had a lot of shenanigans, right? Quote unquote shenanigans, but you also had a lot of voters that weren't necessarily interested in voting, but were basically turned out by the Democrat machine in places like Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Maine, those kind of suburban older middle-aged women and men that kind of just turned out for Biden out of nowhere. Some of them don't even know that they turned out, but a lot of them did turn out. And a lot of those people aren't voting because those are the people that are missing from the early returns. So it is almost a guarantee that Republicans, based on the early vote data, are looking a lot better than what they were last time. And right now, it is looking abysmal for them in some of these races. I mean, Minnesota, that was a 7 point win last time. It's down to basically a tie. It's like Tilt Harris in my forecast. New Hampshire is a 7 point win. Virginia, I think a 7 point win here, but now it's like a 1 point win. I think Virginia, I have it at about 3 or 4 points. I think when it's not rounded, it's around 3.7 for Harris. Colorado, I think we actually have it as like an 8 point win. Yeah, we have it at about 8. So even Colorado shifts Republican too, which is pretty interesting. And what people don't realize is that Colorado also has a lot of Hispanics like New Mexico does. And so Donald Trump is gaining with Hispanics in a way that, he didn't gain in the previous cycles. If he's really going to only lose Hispanics by less than 15, he's going to make improvements in Colorado, especially with independent voters, because they're pretty swinging in Colorado too. And if he's gaining or at least winning with independents nationwide, like pollsters like Richard Barris are saying, Mark from Rasmussen reports are saying, certain pollsters that were accurate before now have Trump winning independents. And what's even more fascinating is their forecast, or well, at least the margin here for Florida was +3 for Trump. We have in our forecast a 12 point win for Trump in the state. And Barris actually has polled Florida, and he said that his result was Trump +11. And he ended up having a Trump +2.7 poll in 2020, and he won it by 3.4%. So that's also one of the most accurate pollsters in Florida too, probably if not the best one in Florida. So again, a lot of the accurate pollsters are lining up with what we have. They're just lining up, period. And so it's looking like this is going to be an early night. And the Harris campaign, it shows because they're on Fox News now. Harris wants to go on Fox News. Why would she be going on Fox News if she was ahead by 8-9 points in the polling? It's because she's down and her team is telling her you need to change course right now. Something has to change now, because if not, you're going to lose. And the thing that they don't understand is they're more down than they think they're down. They're really down multiple points in all the swing states. I mean, I'm getting pretty confident at this point that he's really going to pull this one out. And if my prediction holds up, election night's not going to be election week. It'll be election hours. Like, if our results hold up from On Point Politics, if our predictions hold up, we're going to know who the winner is by like 12 a.m. Eastern, because by then they would have called North Carolina and Georgia, and probably not even Alaska yet. And Pennsylvania would have probably been at least at maybe 60 something percent, 70% in. But looking at the counties, you probably would know by then who's going to win the state, especially if Trump's going to win Pennsylvania by 5, which is what we have right now. If he's going to really win it by that much, we'll know at 60, 70%. And our plan, or at least our temporary plan for election night, is to stream, but we're also seeing some other options as well. But if we do a nightly stream here, what we're going to do, this is if we hold a nightly stream. If Pennsylvania gets called for Trump, we're calling Michigan and Wisconsin, because those states have always voted together for the last decades, except for 1988 and 1976 are the only years where they differentiated from each other. And those were very specific reasons. And I think it was Wisconsin both times that it happened. It was the same exact state. And it's because the white vote, the rural white vote was way different back then. And if you notice, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa kind of voted together. It was like a little weird, but that's because they have a decent amount of white voters there. And so that's why there's a little bit of a weird pattern with those 3 states kind of like not voting together, but at least like voting within the realm. Like they all kind of trend together, which is kind of strange. and or at least all swing together. So that's what I kind of noticed in the 2016 and 2020 election, even some other elections too. So that really wouldn't happen this time because that old way of how they used to vote isn't really happening anymore now. So if Trump is winning Pennsylvania, he's probably got Michigan and Wisconsin. And so that's what we would do. We would just call all three Rust Belt states if he picks up one of them, even. Maybe if it's Wisconsin first, we'll call Pennsylvania and then wait for Michigan. But if he's winning Michigan or Pennsylvania first, we're calling the other two because there's no way that he's winning Pennsylvania and not winning the other two because they're so demographically similar that it's almost impossible that he'd lose Michigan while winning Pennsylvania by 5. Like, it would just be almost impossible because the demographics are too similar in those states. So hopping over to the electoral college map, we'll kind of fill out what the model has right now for the electoral college. Right now, Donald Trump's up in Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd congressional district. You have Montana safe, Kansas safe, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia are also in the safe Republican column. As of right now, we also have the states of Ohio at 16 points for Donald Trump, and we have Iowa at 18 points for Trump. And in South Carolina, we have Trump plus 21 in the state. So he's doing fairly well with the safe states. He also, there we go. I forgot to add Alaska and Maine second. So those are in the safe Republican column. Maine second is a 16-point win for Donald Trump. That's a massive margin in that district, a huge margin. That's ginormous. That's a huge margin in Maine second because he only won it by 7. And Iowa and Ohio, he only won those by 8 points each. So if he's winning them by 16 and 18, you're going to see big swings in the white working class areas like Wisconsin, like Michigan, like Pennsylvania. You're going to see that continue in those states. And looking at the safe Democrat states, it's nothing like 2020. Kamala's up 21 in California. Biden won the state by 29. And a lot of that regression that we're seeing in California is due to Hispanics moving Republican. Looking at, the District of Columbia, that's a 74-point win. Joe Biden won that by 86. Maryland is a 25-point win only. Massachusetts, 27 points. And Vermont's around a 31-point win. So Vermont is actually one of the only states on here that trends to the left, besides probably Maryland and Massachusetts. And actually, Maryland probably doesn't even trend anywhere. Probably might even trend a point Republican, actually. I think it's actually swinging more Republican than the nation does. So that's pretty interesting, too. So the only other safe district is actually Maine's first. So it is kind of weird because both of them are actually 16-point wins. And Maine right now, when looking at the data, is just about a 2-point win for Harris, which is sort of similar to what we saw for Clinton in 2016. And it's possible, I'm even overestimating her in the state. It really depends on that demographic model, because I even think the demographic model for the 2024 model that we have is probably even overestimating Kamala in the state of Maine. So it's very possible that you may have Maine actually come down to a very narrow margin. Even both campaigns have their internals fairly competitive in those states. Now, looking at some of these likely boost states, Washington, Oregon, they're about roughly, give or take, 12 and 10-point victories respectively. Colorado is around an 8-point win. Illinois just coming in at 10. That's a 7-point underperformance from Joe Biden, which is absolutely abysmal because that shows that Kamala is not doing well with African Americans, especially African American men in those inner cities that are really struggling economically. I mean, it's going to be a huge problem for her down the stretch. Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, like you're seeing all of these move, Republican, including New York. New York in our forecast is actually only a 9-point win for Harris. That's down from 23. So there is a huge Republican trend in New York. And again, that state, Donald Trump's improving more with minority groups than he is with white voters. And so a state like New York, which is a pretty hefty minority state, it makes sense to see a trend to the right in a place like that way more than a place like Chicago, because even Chicago has a lot more white voters than a place like New York does, for example. So when you're looking at this map, and actually even Hawaii is in that column. even Hawaii is in the likely Democrat column. Things are so bad for the Democrats that even Hawaii is safe. And you may say, well, that's a little bit of an overestimation for Trump. Well, when you look at 2008, the state voted for Obama by 45. Then in 2012, it was 43. Then in 2016, it went all the way down to 32. And then it went down to 29, despite the fact that the nation trended Democrats. It probably actually stopped the bleeding in Hawaii. And so now, with the continued rightward trend of Hawaii, as well as the very unpopular administration, on top of the fact you had the Maui fires and a very poor response there, you're going to see a lot of problems. Even Donald Trump won more votes than Joe Biden in the Hawaii primary, even though both primaries were really not even that competitive. So looking at that, she's at 191 likely and safe electoral college votes, which is not a good place to be for a Democrat. Texas and Florida, those are, pretty big wins. Texas, a 14-point win for Trump, Florida 12. And that's going to be fueled by some white, reversion from 2020, as well as Hispanics, especially in the southern border by Texas and in Miami-Dade, West Palm Beach County, Broward County. You're going to see a lot of minority shifts there too. And you're going to even see places like Duval even probably flip back in Florida. So you're going to see huge reversions of some of the trends that we saw before in 2020 completely reversed now. And Donald Trump's going to just crush it in Texas and Florida. Now, there are more likely Republican states, including North Carolina and Georgia. Now, everyone's like, oh, well, no, there's no way. They were so close last time. Well, if Kamala Harris is underperforming with African-American men by 10 to 15 points, depending on the poll, she's not winning North Carolina or Georgia. She's not. And that's only factoring in the black vote. That's not even talking about the white vote or certain working class voters that would have voted for Biden and now are just not even voting, or they're voting for Trump and they're not voting for Harris. And those states ancestrally have Republican DNA. So to say that, in a tie national popular vote or Trump plus 2 or 3, she's still favored, is just completely ludicrous. And if the 2 to 3 point victory in the popular vote happens, he'd have to be up in Georgia and North Carolina by multiple points. Those states probably even trend back Republican because they've been trending more Democrat as time has gone on. I actually think that the states are going to reverse trend because of the fact that Trump's going to gain so much with African Americans and gain so much with white voters in those two states that you may actually see a Republican trends in those states once again. Same thing in Arizona and Nevada. Arizona is probably going to end up being a likely state too. Because, guys, Donald Trump right now is in an environment where, according to Gallup, Republicans are favored by 3 points in party identification. The economic confidence level is minus 22. And especially now with your younger voter that is struggling financially, a lot of those people are going to feel these margins for Donald Trump in these states. Like, that's where you're going to see those big shifts from, especially in a place like Nevada, where you have the culinary unions, where literally, according to Rich Barris, they've been a very reliable source to listen to. They predicted that Harry Reid was going to win his seat, despite, the polls showing that that wasn't going to be the case. You saw that in 2016, they said Hillary was going to take it and that she needed to do some work, and that eventually they were like, okay, she did what she had to do. She probably will win it. And then in 2020, they backed Joe Biden. They said, okay, he's going to take the state. And so now they're like, oh, doesn't matter what happens. Donald Trump is going to win the state of Nevada. So they've been a pretty crazy group, that's been like pretty accurate, or at least a very reliable source in the state. And they're saying that Trump's going to probably easily win Nevada. And so it just gives me even more confidence in my forecast, and especially that those places have large amounts of Hispanics, especially in Clark County and Maricopa, where about a third or a fourth, to like basically like 1/4 of the electorate's going to be. So again, it's looking really bad in Nevada and Arizona for the Kamala Harris campaign. And that's about it, because Trump's at 268. So where's she going to get it? I mean, there's no way she's winning all the Sunbelt states by over 5 and not winning at least one of the Rust Belt states, especially with the way trends are now. They're going to be voting closer to how the Rust Belt is, because the Sunbelt at large has kind of been trending left, for the exception of Nevada, which, funny enough, has more non-college voters than even most of the swing states. And that's why a lot of people actually had Nevada flipping Republican in some of their early 2024 forecasts before even a lot of the swing states, because Donald Trump was seemingly going to do better with non-college voters, and a lot of them are in Nevada. So now Wisconsin coming in here at 7 points rounded. So I know that sounds crazy. I know that sounds like a ludicrous margin, but the polling that overestimated the Democrats by 6 to 7 points now has the race tied. And if you look back in history, 4 years ago today, I can even pull it up here. You won't see it on your screen, but right now, Harris is leading by 0.3 in Wisconsin. Biden is ahead by 6.3. So if you were to apply that shift to Wisconsin now, you'd see almost a 5 point win, or a little bit over 5 points in the state of Wisconsin, almost a 6 point win. And Clinton was polling at 6 points ahead and she lost it. If you were to apply that shift, you would see almost a 6 point win in Wisconsin. So, well, if I get +7 and he wins it by 6, I mean, well, gee, I guess I overestimate him by a point. Oh, well, I'm still going to be more accurate than everybody else. So looking at this, it's just really, really nuts that he's really going out here and just taking a lot of these states. Same thing for Pennsylvania. He's going out there and he's probably going to win that by 5-2. He's going to kill it in Pennsylvania. You have a lot of groups in the Philly areas that are not liking Kamala Harris. And on top of that, you got the assassination attempt too, which is affecting the polling data. Like if that hadn't happened, he'd probably be leading by 3 or 4. But that definitely helped him quite a bit in the state, probably about a point or so. Definitely did influence his margin 100%. And so looking at this, Donald Trump is already winning 297 with just the likely and safe Republican states. So if this happens, it's an early election night. There is no, oh, we're going to wait till the next day. That's not going to happen. You'll know he's won by like 12 a.m., 1 a.m. on that night. Looking at some lean Republican districts or states, you're going to see Michigan falls in that category. And this is where, Rich and Barnes's analysis, which tomorrow we're going to have Rich on the show and we'll be asking him about this. It's crazy, guys. He is the most accurate pollster in Michigan, and he polled in mid-October where he says that Trump still catches up at the end, even after this, and he's got Trump up by almost 4 in Michigan, and we have almost a 5-point margin there. I mean, he's up by 4.7. And actually, I believe the rounded margin here, actually, by the way, the rounded margin's +5 because it's a 4.7 not rounded. But when you round it, it's a 5-point victory. This is within the range of what Robert Barnes was talking about, a 4 to 5 point win in Michigan. I mean, it's just insane. People that have been accurate before, that really pay attention to stuff, that understand the American people, which I feel like I do too, they're seeing the same things that I'm seeing. And I'm looking at it purely from a mathematical perspective. Looking at accurate pollsters, weighing all the polls by party ID and reweighting everything so that the polls don't have the same response bias that they had last time. I have my own aggregates. The same aggregate that right now has Trump up by 3.5 in the popular vote for 2020 when I completed, it's Biden plus 5.1. And funny enough, the more polls you add in it, the more accurate it gets because it needs a higher sample size to be able to grade pollsters who have more voters in them to give them a higher grade in my aggregate. And so when you do that, the more pollsters you add in the average, the more accurate it actually gets. So that's also very fascinating too. And so when we look at this, Donald Trump is just literally winning all the swing states super easily. I mean, he's just killing it in all the swing states. And when you look at these deep blue states, these are the real swing states for this cycle. These are the actual competitive swing states. New Mexico's coming in at just 2 points for Kamala Harris. And the only reason why she's winning that by 2 points is because she's getting saved by the very liberal voters in Albuquerque. I guarantee you, if I overestimate Kamala Harris in this, which it's still possible because Donald Trump does catch up at the end of the cycle and it'll be reflected in the polling data. Like I'm just saying, if Donald Trump catches up at the end like he has in the last few cycles, don't be surprised if I have Virginia, New Mexico, or Minnesota, or New Hampshire, or Maine, any of them flipping. Don't be surprised if that happens because he's already catching up even earlier than he usually does. And now he's actually still making some of the blue states competitive again. Because actually at some point during, August, beginning of August, middle of August, Virginia was going to be like a 5-6 point win for Harris. New Mexico was almost likely Democrat. She actually did catch up. Unlike what most people will tell you, she actually did catch up. Colorado was like almost the same margin as it was in 2020. There was a point where she was actually improving in Colorado. She was on track to win the popular vote by 2 to 3, and we were headed for a close election again. But that is not what we're seeing here anymore now. It's just not there. We are not seeing that anymore. And so now with Virginia, it's rounded to 4 points, but I could even see it being closer. The most accurate election modeler in Virginia, who predicted Glenn Youngkin's victory in 21. He predicted Biden's margin within half a point. He got, 139 out of 140 districts, state legislative races correct in 2023. Like, I mean, this guy doesn't have a better record. And right now, with the early vote coming in, he's factoring that into his model. The state's just getting redder and redder. And even with him having preliminary, models for like election day votes and like early in-person votes, when he gives like basically a tied result on election day, which isn't going to happen. Trump's obviously going to win the election day vote in Virginia by over 5 at least. And early votes is definitely not 8-2 Harris. Even when he gives her those, just to give her the benefit of the doubt before he publicly releases the model, Harris is still up by only 5. She's only up by 5. So even if she were to outperform election day expectations by almost an unrealistic amount, she's still only winning the state by 5, which, funny enough, that was the ceiling we had for her back in August. She was only going to win it by like 5 or 6, which is around what Hillary won it by. So things are not looking good for her in Virginia either. I mean, Trump actually has a chance. I mean, Glenn Youngkin's running around telling people he's got a shot to win it because he does. He actually does have a shot to win the state of Virginia. Maine is around a 2-point win. You do have a lot of, transplants up there that are making the state more liberal, but it's going to be closer than what it was in 2020. It is a left-trending state, but it is going to basically move with the nation, and it's going to be sort of competitive. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if Trump picked it off on election day. Nebraska second's interesting because it is a lean Democrat. It is a left-trending district, but this is the one I feel like I could be the most inaccurate in. And even my 2020 model, I can actually check it right now and see what my 2020 model had. But I actually overestimated the Democrat, Joe Biden, by like 2 points in the district. That's actually one of my worst polling errors in my model, at least in a district or a state that was within 10 points. That's a pretty bad miss there. And so it's very possible that Trump picks off the district. Now, do I think Harris is actually the favorite there? Probably, because the district is just moving so far left that, yeah, it probably is going to go to her. Now, New Hampshire is literally coming in as just a 1-point win right now. It's only a 1-point victory for Kamala Harris. It's super close. You have a lot of, transplants from Boston, Massachusetts that are making the state more liberal, but you have this independent vote that just doesn't like Kamala Harris. And even Donald Trump, despite a bunch of Democrats turning out to vote for Nikki Haley, he still won the primary by 10 points in like a 60-40 Republican Democrat national environment in the state of New Hampshire. Because that's basically what it was. It was like 60% Republican, 40% Democrat. When you really look at it and how the votes were, that's kind of what you had. And he still won by 10. So it's like, that's the thing. He's still won by 10 points. And the electorate in New Hampshire is like R+9, by the way. When you look at like the unleaned results for the electorates, he's up by about 9 points. So this is not looking good for Kamala Harris in New Hampshire either. And Minnesota, the final state, it's a tilt margin for Harris. It is super close. It could go either way. It would probably even be appropriate for me to put it in the toss-up category because it is basically marked as a 0 on my map. So I could technically even put it in the toss-up category. But really, it is probably tilt blue or maybe like a point Democrat, I could say maybe. But it is close. It is very close. Don't be surprised when you see Minnesota being competitive on election night because it is going to be very close. Because if Trump's winning Wisconsin by 7 and he's up in Iowa by 18, Minnesota is not going to be a 3 to 4 point win for Harris or a 5-point win. It's not. Hennepin County is not going to buck the trend that hard, especially if Wisconsin's voting for Trump by anything over 5 and Iowa by anything over 15. And so this is the map right now, guys. Donald Trump is up with 312 electoral votes to Harris's 226, except he's got a very comfortable win on his hands, and he's winning all the swing states very easily, and certain blue states are in jeopardy. And if he continues to catch up in the national polling data, you can expect Minnesota to be a flip. You can expect New Mexico to be close. You can expect Virginia to be competitive. You can even expect Maine and New Hampshire to be very close, and even Nebraska second to flip as well. And so if you guys did enjoy this, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.